And we're live. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on when and where you're watching the show. This is the Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live Show with Marion Spears Carr. I'm your host. I am so incredibly excited to have a friend and colleague today and here to talk about this topic about ERGenius, unlocking hidden leadership potential in your workforce. And my guest is Chantel Johnson. Chantel and I got to know each other years ago when she was in the recruiting side of the world at Novant Health. Chantel, introduce yourself to the audience, and we're glad to have you. Looking forward to talking about your work and your book, and say hello. And if you're watching live, you know what to do. Post in the comments. Let us know where you're watching. We'll give you a shout out. And as you have questions for Chantel, please post it in the comments. Chantel, introduce yourself. It's great. Thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am so excited to be here with you, my friend Marion. And like you said, we go way back. We won't age ourselves, though, right? We won't tell people how many years.
Yeah, we were a long time. A long time.
A long time. But as Marion said, he and I met each other when I was recruiting for great integrated health system, Novant Health in North Carolina. And Marion has just been a great friend, a great colleague, a great person to bounce things off of. And again, Marion, thank you so much for inviting me to the show. Chantel Johnson, I am the CEO and founder of Talent for the Culture, LLC. And we help organizations reevaluate their organizational cultures to meet the talent needs of today. And there's a lot of that packed into that, my friend, but ERGenius is one tool that we've created as a product to our clients. We're really excited to share what we've learned from the ERG world and what we have to offer to our friends who are joining us now live in this session. So thank you so much, my friend, for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you, Chantel. One of the things that we talked about, that you and I talked about, and the reason I wanted you on the show is one of the areas that I work. And by the way, for those of you who don't know my work, I run an executive search firm called Inflow Executives. It's my third iteration of an entrepreneur focused executive search firm. Our specialty is in the healthcare and life sciences space. And one of the things that Chantel, you and I talked about was really this amazing challenges that healthcare organizations and really organizations, not just in that space, are dealing with, but in terms of workforce challenges, recruitment, retention issues, all the stresses that have come that were really exposed during the pandemic has made the workforce challenges for companies even more exacerbated. And then there's this changing climate around how we work with our teams. How do we develop our teams? From a diversity perspective, there's some challenges there as well. And the thing that really struck me about the work that you were doing, particularly around these employee resource groups, is leveraging them not just for internal improvement on how the teams work together, how the people work together, how the employees are represented, but on a much broader scale, how it can be leveraged to increase recruitment, improve retention, improve all of those things. And that there's, as you say, there's this hidden opportunity within all these groups that we need to tap into. And I'd love for you to talk about that problem that you're solving in that regard. Shout out to Marlene Sodden checking in from Roswell, Georgia. Marlene, glad to have you. Glad to see you. And if you're watching live, please let us know. We want to know you're there. Joe Riley is checking in from Alabama.
Yeah,
Thank you,
I hope
Joe.
some of my peeps are chiming in too. We need to see some of the peeps from Chantel's network as well.
Exactly. Cindy's checking in, checked in and said she'll watch the replay. Stacey Woodruff is checking in from Nashville, Tennessee. We got a lot of people checking in. Chantel, talk to me about this first, talk about the problem and talk about how you really solve that problem and how you're helping organizations leverage their ERGs in that way.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. And I must say, I must give a shout out to you, Marion, in terms of the great work that you do from the executive search perspective. Again, that's how we met. That's how we, became to know each other and share kind of in that space. But as I've been in this space from a recruitment, from an HR perspective, 3 decades now, I'm going to age myself. I've found that from a recruitment perspective, we focus a lot of efforts on the recruitment side, which is very important. However, as the workplace dynamics become increasingly challenging for many of us, there's an untapped hidden potential of employees within your own organizations. And when you think about employee resource groups, these are employees who are dedicated to the mission, the vision, and the values of their organization. And they also want to create environments where everyone within those employee resource groups have a sense of belonging. There's a sense of psychological safety. And when you mix all of those ingredients into just a tremendous opportunity, a talent pool or talent pipeline, why not leverage that as a way to look at your talent pathway? What I found in my experience, Marion, however, many organizations don't take advantage of that talent pool. Again, you have dedicated employees who are volunteering their time most of the time in these spaces as ERG leaders. And I will tell you from my past experience, we had about 29% of our employee base who were a member of an employee resource group at my last employer.
Wow.
One of our largest employee resource group was our Women's Network Resource Group. We had 10,000 employees.
Wow.
10,000 employees who were members of this employee resource group. And we had 2 co-presidents. And you think about that from a leadership perspective. They were managing programmatic, they were managing budgets, they were managing people, they were managing the strategic direction. Think about the potential you have in those 2 co-presidents leading lines of business and translating what they learned as ERG leaders into business lines.
Incredible. And you think about from that perspective, just the mass of talent within that number. Let me ask you this question. Why do you think that senior executives have not necessarily discounted that value within these groups? But where do you think the disconnect is? How do you think they see ERGs? And then how would you frame it as a strategic advantage for them if they would look at it differently?
Yeah, I believe, and again, in my experience, I think from a C-suite perspective, we as HR professionals have an opportunity to amplify the work of employee resource groups. I think it's incumbent upon human resource leaders, DEI leaders, to amplify the outputs of employee resource groups to the C-suite to provide that awareness. I would bet, Marion, that many CEOs probably are not aware of the magnitude of the outcomes that ERGs produce for their organizations. I think I may have shared this with you. I'm working with a client, and this is a smaller organization, but this client wanted to create a partnership, first an awareness of ERGs with their PAC, their Political Action Committee. This was before the election, but there were many opportunities he felt that in the ERG and the PAC, they had synergies that would probably complement one another. And when I tell you, it's been fascinating to see kind of the light bulbs go off between the 2 groups who wants and have an awareness of each other. And we are on the trajectory to drive some great outcomes as a result of this partnership.
That's exciting to hear. And you mentioned that you work with some smaller companies too. And my followers on LinkedIn are range from very large healthcare organizations to smaller organizations. What would you suggest to these smaller companies? How do they even get started with ERG? And then what would be the process of saying, okay, this is something that we need within our organization. This is a kind of the next level of creating what you were talking about, from a inclusion perspective. I love the thing that you talked about from a perspective of creating that culture of safety, and people can their voices can be heard. And I really appreciate the fact that you use the word amplify. I think that's a really valuable word when we think about how do we make the opportunities for our internal teams, how do we leverage that. I love that idea, that vision of amplification. But talk to me a little bit about how can leaders maybe get involved with the ERGs? I know that's a little bit outside of the conversation, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's really a good place to start as well. And if you have questions, let us know in the comments. Chantel's here. Jennifer checked in from Alpharetta. Jennifer, thank you for being with us.
Hopefully you're not getting too much snow, Jennifer.
Yeah. I'm. And by the way, for those of you who are watching, Chantel's back in my home state of North Carolina, in the region that I'm from, and I'm now in the mountains of Georgia. We're not going to get the weather; it's going to go south of us. But Chantel, what are your thoughts about how can organizations get involved with creating these groups?
Yeah.
And then talk a little bit more about how they can leverage it based on the other challenges that we're facing.
Yeah. No, I would be remiss if I didn't say, my friend, first I would encourage leaders to call me a talent for the culture to help them.
Absolutely.
Help them pull together their
100%,
strategy, right, in terms of employee resource groups. But from a tactical perspective, if you are in an organization, and let's focus, Marion, on the healthcare arena, because you and I both know the workforce challenges that we have experienced from the recruiting side, from the retention side, from those at the bedside. There's a nursing shortage, there's a faculty shortage in terms of nursing, all of the things. And so it's like the perfect storm that we have within the healthcare sector. What I would say from a tactical perspective, if you are a nurse director or nurse manager within a healthcare organization, 9 times out of 10, that organization is going to have some sort of employee resource group. I would encourage those nurse leaders to reach out to their HR professional and ask questions related to the employee resource groups. How can they get their nurses involved into the employee resource groups? And you think about the shared governance model of nursing, right?
Yes.
Perfect opportunity for them to leverage that shared governance model within an ERG. And so from a tactical perspective, that's what I would encourage those within the healthcare arena. In all other areas, again, reach out to your HR business partner, ask about employer resource groups, take advantage of those groups, and see if there's an opportunity for your employees, your team, to engage with those ERGs. I will share with you, Marion, because I think it'd be helpful for the audience to hear this. Gallup released some of the workplace challenges for 2025. And in 2024, U.S. employee engagement reached an all-time low, an 11-year low. You and I both know this, right?
Yeah, we've been watching it play out dramatically in a lot of different areas within our segments. Yeah, exactly.
While concurrently, employees are seeking new job opportunities at the highest level since 2015. And so again, when you think about that perfect storm of low engagement and high propensity for employees to seek employment elsewhere, employee resource groups can be an answer. I'll go back to what I said earlier. They create a sense of psychological safety. They create a sense of belonging. And they also create a sense of pride because of the outcomes that they're able to achieve within their respective employee resource groups. As a leader, I would love to harness that energy and see how that could help engage the employees within my respective work area.
Talk a little bit. Marlene has a good question in terms of just how would you define what an ERG, employee resource group, looks like? And you mentioned that with the organization you were with, one of the ERGs was women, the women's group. So that was their focus within supporting that side of the business. But tell me a little bit about some examples of the of ERGs, the different, I guess, different cohorts or different focuses they might have.
Yeah, absolutely. So ERGs, employee resource groups, are essentially affinity groups. There's an affinity for whatever dimension of diversity is important for that particular group. Now, it's important to understand, while it's an affinity group, if you don't personally identify with that affinity group per se, from a diversity perspective, you still belong in that group. You come in and you can belong in that group. So some of the groups that I've seen in my experience, of course, women's ERG, and when you think about the healthcare shortages in the healthcare workforce, there's a large percentage of women within the workforce of healthcare. So having a women's ERG, I think, is really important for the healthcare sector. We also had a caregivers group. And so when you think about within the healthcare arena, the aging workforce, some of the things in which aging workforce have to deal with that maybe you and I didn't have to deal with. We call that, one of the phenomena is a sandwich generation. You have elderly parents, you have children who may still be in school, and you're sandwiched in between those two factors. So you're caregiving for two different populations that have vastly different needs. And so having an affinity group for caregivers where those who are in that environment can come and talk about their challenges, but also hear from their peers to say, well, here's what I've tried. Here's some resources that we can leverage together. Again, what a powerful resource for an organization to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I love that example because, I mean, if you think about, think about that particularly the X generation, people that are in the workforce are having that primarily, the older baby boomer parents and then kids in high school or even younger, some of them even younger than that. We've ran into that recently where we're with my father and passed away a few years ago. I was, we were managing both sides of the fence, and I would love to have had a connection with other people going through that. And the thing that I see that from a recruitment perspective is leveraging that is if we're recruiting at that level, recruiting people from that generation, being able to share that resource is even in-house at all, that what a value add that would be to go to work at a company like that. I love that idea.
And I'll add to, Mary, because I think it's important to taking it back to the workforce perspective and unlocking that hidden leadership potential. Think about the skills that if you had a leader of a caregivers group who understood the complexities of a caregiver, but also understood the resources that were available, how they could then translate that into their team. Because when you think about your team members as a leader, inevitably you probably have someone on your team who's challenged with some of the same problems that those in that caregiver group might have. And so bringing that knowledge back to your team or bringing that leader into the fold of that business line, what a phenomenal opportunity that is from a recruitment and retention perspective. And I see where Marlene had a question. Marlene, we'll drop that in the chat, that Gallup poll, but it's Gallup Workplace Challenges 2025. If you Google it, you should be able to locate it, but we'll drop that in the chat as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So I had the opportunity to understand a little bit about ERGs when I spent a few years with Jackson Healthcare as I was transitioning from where I'd sold one of my companies and I was working with Jackson Healthcare.
I'm learning a lot from you, my friend, in terms of this entrepreneur things, but go ahead.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's right. I'm a serial, and for those of you who don't know, you're watching Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live Show. I am a serial entrepreneur. I realize that oftentimes I'm only a really good resource for my clients and probably not the best employee myself. That's probably why I have to start companies all the time. But one of the things I loved about, they had a variety of ERGs in place across the Jackson Healthcare family of companies. And one of them was innovation. It was a group that came together just to talk about innovation in a lot of different capacities. And what a great learning opportunity that was. And I got involved with that because innovation and disruptive change is really a key interest of mine. Talk about how those type of ERGs could be leveraged. You know, what are some of the ideas that come out of that type of ERG, and how does that tie back to the workforce? You know, in other words, what's a problem that the workforce could, within workforce, that could be solved where a specialty group like that could be involved?
Yeah. And I would say that all ERGs have great innovative mindsets, right? Because they collectively come together not only to create this sense of we're in this together, but also come together to talk about, okay, well, what problems are you having in your team, in your business line? You know, let me talk about, you know, some of the things that, you know, that we have here. I will share one of the opportunities that we came up with within one of my former employers. We had a veterans employee resource group. And I think, Marion, I think you shared with me that you were you know, part of a veterans or military ERG, or had sat in on one of those sessions with your last employer.
Yeah, I supported them. I'm not a veteran myself, but the reason I got involved, I'm a brain injury survivor, and I've had multiple brain. I had a major brain injury when I was younger, and I had multiple concussions, and I've really paid attention to what's happened in the world of PTSD as it relates to brain injury, and that led me to, you know, trying to get involved and seeing what was happening in regards to the veterans groups and educating and that piece. And so, yeah, it was really interesting to be involved with that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with me, my friend. And I'm so blessed that you're still here with me. Well, we can take this journey together. But,
well, there we go.
But going back to the veterans ERG, the veterans ERG, they identified an opportunity to improve the onboarding of transitioning military into the civilian workplace.
Yep.
We didn't have the capabilities within my organization to really be great at it. But through the ERG, the veterans ERG, we were able to identify partnership with the Department of Defense, the DoD. And they have a pretty robust transitioning program for retired military personnel into the civilian workplace. And a lot of that, Marion, goes back to what you discussed, is PTSD. How do you ensure that that veteran has the needed resources coming into a civilian workplace where different things in the workplace may be a trigger for them? And for example, when you think about celebrations like the 4th of July, Memorial Day, where those are commemorative things in which we need to celebrate, a boom or a nick could make someone who suffered from PTSD not feel safe. And so having the ERG share those things with our well-being team, we would have never, not at this pace that we were able to accomplish and understand and to put things in place, we would never been able to do that in the time that we were, unless it were for the ERG dedicated to our veterans.
And that opens up a whole nother opportunity for that organization that would do that to grow their workforce, bring people who really want to work, people who want to do their jobs, who are committed, or all the veterans I've ever met, for the most part, are like hardworking, like focused on what they're doing. Like, what a great resource if we could create an environment where they feel like they'll be supported. You know, they're going to come in and do great work, and they're going to fill some of those openings that we have. I posted in the chat, but I would love to see if any of our guests, and by the way, if you're watching this live, please, you know, post your questions in the chat, but also if you watch the recording, we will still respond to those comments. I would love to see if anyone that's watching is part of an ERG, or they have ERGs at their organization. Chantel, tell me a little bit about when you're brought into an organization with your new company and with the book that you're working on, et cetera. What's one of the ways you evaluate where they are in terms of leveraging their ERGs? What are some of the kind of hallmarks that you look for in terms of the groups that they have? And then I guess the follow-up question is, how do you identify deficits and create a plan to solve that problem?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question, my friend. And I want to make sure that we address Marlene's question. She asked about the acronym ERG, Employee Resource Groups. I think we did, but I just want to make sure that we took care of that. And
yeah, we did. Yep.
Marlene, and for the others, you may hear employee resource groups referred several different ways: BRGs, business resource groups; NRGs, network resource groups. They're all type of acronyms related to, but the distinction you'll always hear are RG, resource group, and whatever the organization refers to them as. And so, Marion, in terms of your question, I think I remember the question: how do I identify the deficits in terms of where the organization is?
How do you see like what the hallmarks of where they are with their ERGs, and then where the lacking, or where's the lacking, or where the deficits are, and then kind of how do you address that?
Yeah, it's important when I come in and I work for an organization. It's the assessment is really key to the success of the project itself. So understanding the people analytics, where are employees who are a member of an ERG, where are they from an employee engagement perspective as compared to those who are not? What is the retention rate of ERG members as to those who are not? And some of those are indicators in terms of where the organization is. The other thing that we take a look at too is, what is the percentage of employees who are a member of an employee resource group? Depending on the size, anywhere from 20 to 30% is kind of the sweet spot that I've seen within organizations. And if organizations are under that 20% mark, then there's some other dynamics in terms of communication and internal communication, getting the word out there. And I think it's also important to note is making sure that frontline leaders understand the importance of allowing their employees to participate in those employee resource groups. Because when you look at it from the perspective of, well, my employee doesn't have time to sit in this group to, play games. We talked about that, right? Play games, within a resource group. Being very intentional about the outcomes that the employee resource group has achieved throughout the years, and with the addition of more employees in resource groups, the potential the organization has for greater innovation and outcomes. So those are some things that we take a look at in terms of how do we determine where an organization is, and what are some of the kind of the telltale signs that we need to take a look at.
Yeah, I think it's important. I like the way you come at it from an evaluation perspective, and I love the idea that you question if their participation. And by the way, I said precipitation because in the back of my mind I'm thinking about the weather. We're looking
out the window, waiting for a little bit.
Yeah, we're waiting for the snow to go. So for those of you, that was a Freudian slip about the weather. That participation number is a telltale sign. And so a lot of my, and we're almost, I told you this was going to go fast, Chantel. So we're going to have another, we'll schedule another conversation. But a lot of my audience is hospital CEOs. I work with hospital CEOs. That's I do a lot of work in a lot of different areas, but a lot of the people that I connect with are hospital CEOs. What's the one thing that you would tell them if they were skeptical about being supportive of an ERG, and what's the one thing you could tell them that would maybe be the thing to wake them up a little bit, or say, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should rethink that. And we'll wrap up on that. What's your thoughts on that, Chantel?
What I would say, my friend Marion, when as a CEO and you're sitting in your MOCs, your management operating committee meetings, and every session you hear that your retention is out the roof. ERGs are a significant pull for you to mitigate your retention of your healthcare staff. I would imagine, and you and I both know this, that we're spending an exorbitant amount of money on recruitment.
Massive.
I would challenge your listeners to take a look at retention efforts, and your ERGs is one place to do that.
I love that. And I've posted your LinkedIn in the chat and the website. How can people get in touch with you and stay connected with you, Chantel? And then I'm going to go ahead and ask you. We're going to come back. I'm going to bring you back in later this spring when you a little bit further about the book. We haven't even talked about the book yet. We talked about your work. We're going to talk about the book, but share a little bit about the book. How can people get connected with you? And absolutely enjoyed talking with you today, Chantel. I'm so glad you were on my show.
Thank you, my friend. As you mentioned, Marion, please follow me on LinkedIn, Chantel Johnson. You can follow me there. Company, pretty simple. Talent for the number 4D, the letter D, culture. You can follow us there. The book will be coming out, Sustaining ERG Impact, 12 Months to Lead with Purpose, Recharge with Power. That will be coming out the end of this month, and we will socialize that on LinkedIn and our other social channels. And then, Marion, I would love to come back to talk more about ERGenius, the suite of tools that we have for organizations who are ready to take that next step in leveraging ERGs as a talent retention tool.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on, because I think, my focus with the Inflow Executives, the new company, is really not just about search, but also around making sure organizations have learning as a core value and development as a core value, and what you're doing is in alignment with that. So Chantel, thanks for being on the show. For those of you who are watch Healthcare Thought Leadership LinkedIn Live show for the very first time, thank you. Please share this with your network. You can share the event, even though it's going to be recorded and they can watch it. Please post in the comments if you have questions. If you have topics or ideas about future shows, please let us know. Got a couple special shows coming up that we'll announce soon. Chantel, thank you for being with us. Have a great day, and just so glad you were on the show. I really appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Marion. Thank you for all the folks who attended and those who will listen later.
Absolutely. Have a great day.